Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Renaissance Room podcast. And in today's episode, I just wanted to come on and talk about what I think has been a ongoing, reoccurring hindrance to the development, right? The personal, emotional development of African Americans. And I think what that is a lack of, and I'm obviously speaking slowly because I'm trying to get my thoughts together. But I think what it is a lack of responsibility. You know what I mean? I think on one end, people start to acquire responsibilities before they're psychologically ready to carry out those responsibilities, right? So it's like they have responsibility, but they have no wisdom, right? It's like age mismatched. It's not appropriate for their age and for where they are in their lives and their development. But I think for a lot of people, and honestly, specifically a lot of men, I don't know what it is about some parents just in general, right? I don't want to make this a black issue, but again, y'all know I don't have any white friends. All right. So, I don't know what it is that is like this cultural thing where the ways in which black boys are socialized and that really, really low expectation, right? I don't know where that comes from. I really don't know where that comes from. And I'm not trying to just, rag on black men. Y'all know I come over here and try to have, pretty compassionate conversations. And I just want to shine a light on things. And I don't even know if I'm going to post this video because I don't want to get too far left. Sometimes I think just, when you're online and you're consuming content, you can come on and try to make a podcast and it may not necessarily be your insight. It may just be something you're observing. But that type of stuff you ingest, it comes in and, so I may or may not even post this video. But I just kind of wanted to talk about something that I just kind of noticed. Yeah, so I think for black boys, I think the ways in which they're socialized, which again, like I said, is this continuum of low expectations, right? It's this continuum of, it's just kind of like this continuum of not really having any responsibility. And I think if most guys were honest, they can really attest to how it's there really was no routine and structure within their lives. There was no punishment for bad grades or bad behavior. There was just no structure whatsoever. And I think regardless of how you raise your kids, genders and all, I think at the end of the day, you can get kids on a routine. male, woman, grandmother, you can get them on a routine. You can give them structure. And so I say all that to say, it's you meet so many people and here we are, it's 2025, right? And I just got to be real. The reality is that for so many people who do not go to college, right? And I'm not here to say, actually, I'm just going to say what I got to say. For so many people who don't go to college, your reality is a pretty much mediocre, entry-level position, okay? That's not to say that it's bad. I'm not here to get into, being an elitist. But what I am saying is that when you don't go to college, okay, what you're essentially saying is I'm signing up for the workforce and I'm going to be within the workforce and I'm going to contribute my efforts to the workforce and I'm going to do this for however long it takes and I'm going to go about acquiring raises. I'm going to try to climb, the ladder at this company and I'm going to that's essentially what you're signing up for. You know what I mean? And I knew that as a very young girl. I knew that when I was back and forth, trying to figure out what I wanted my major to be in college. I knew that just as a young woman prior to even going to college because I was perceptive. It was evident to me that my teachers had degrees, right? Most of the white people who were in positions of, jobs that weren't freaking insufferable, you know what I mean, had college degrees. And to me, it was just a no-brainer that most people who are going to be working a job that makes a decent, wage is going to be someone who's college educated. And you could talk numbers, you could talk how it's whatever. I just knew that that was the reality, right? And for everybody who did not go to college, when I was a young girl, I was working these different jobs and things like that. And I was meeting a bunch of men and women who were older, who didn't go to college, who were working these like jobs that weren't really glamorous, and again, not here to be classes, at the end of the day, you get grown and hey, it is what it is. But I say all that to say is I just don't think that there are many people who sit African-American children down and like really give them practical wisdom, like I don't know. And I say all this, the reason why I'm saying all this is because I meet so many young people and some older people too, like in their 30s, like mid 30s, early 30s, and just incredibly entitled. And it makes me question, why are you so entitled? Why are we so entitled to things that we didn't work for? You can join the wagon, right, with the rest of us, and we can critique systems, and we can talk about the injustice and discrimination, and we can talk about how you have to overcome certain barriers, to even get in college. Like, we can talk about inequality. I'm down for that. But at the same time, right, like, you still have to talk about the realities of what happens when you don't choose to go a certain way, And I think one thing that kind of hit me, like when I was like 19, 20, was the conversations of like, you don't need college to be successful. You don't got to go to college. And that came from everybody who did not go to college. That came from everybody in my city who didn't go to college, who maybe was getting by back in 2019. All right. When the prices wasn't given what they was given today, when things were maybe a little bit more affordable, where, there maybe was a sense of community, when everybody wasn't kind of like, feeling entitled, feeling themselves, feeling left out. OK, when the gap between the have and the have nots within the Black community grew like significantly. But I just think something that I realized within our communities and just how I look at young kids and young girls and young boys, it's like, there's just nobody telling them the reality of life. I know we want to talk about America, and I'm all here for that. But at the end of the day, y'all, when we start talking about how to live a life, how to be an activist and still live a life, like, it's fundamental. It's only one way in, one way out. Okay, sure, you could become a content creator and give it your best shot. You could pursue entrepreneurship with no money and give it your best shot. But at the end of the day, come on, man. Like, that's not, you see what I'm saying? So I just think that that's something that I find to be most common. And so you have all of these older Black men, these young Black men, and it's like they're out here, they're bitter, they're angry at the wrong people. See, you get to a certain age and you want to have certain things, despite what people come online and say, oh, you can be child free, right? Despite these unlimited amounts of freedom that we project onto the youth, right? And that we project, which I would actually argue within American society is this perpetuation of adolescence, which says be free, always be free, do what it is that you love, don't have kids, don't settle down, just be free, right? And people don't realize that freedom absolutely starts to become a cage at some point in your life. There is nothing exciting about unlimited options. All that leads to is indecision and entitlement. Because guess what? Now you're older and you want to date that type of woman or that type of man. But guess what? People who've worked hard for things, it's not about being the classes. It's about, okay, wait a minute. Let's talk about compatibility. Okay? Compatibility. You see what I'm saying? People who work hard for things don't want to have to come and kind of help you out and settle. And no, that's not, it's not a matter of being a person who is, thinking that they're better than anybody. It's about life. All right. That's not fair to that. It's not about fairness. It's just about what makes sense. And I don't feel like that needs to be justified. All right. And that's just my little 2 cents on a little bit of the dating discourse. But at the end of the day, y'all, we just have this really, it's just a huge sense of entitlement. People don't work for certain things. And, whether or not you realize at whatever age and stage in your life that you were kept out of the system, now it's your job to figure out how to build from here. And that's the responsibility of so many African Americans. And I think that's something that's really unfortunate about our communities, is that by the time we get it, right, by the time we wake up and realize what is going on within our communities, what has taken place systemically that has led me to this situation, what has my mother went through, what has my father went through, how has, unemployment shaped my generation, how has, drugs and the crack era shaped my generation. Like, before we wake up and start realizing the historical effects and the impact that these things have had at our front door, right, it's too late. wait. Because now, we want to be 50. We want to be talking like we wise. But it's like the time has gone. You can't get it back. You see what I'm saying? So I just think it's unfortunate. You have a lot of people who are out here and they're directionless. Just absolutely directionless. You have some people who are able to, some young guys who, did work out for them and they do have great jobs or whatever the case may be. But then it's like they're dealing with substance abuse and they're empty and they ain't dealing with the trauma and they're not getting the help for their mental health. And they're out here in these white rooms and they're not sure what's going on, but it's microaggressions. You know what I mean? Like, so it's just like you just really have a ongoing cycle of a lack of knowledge. All right. Of a lack of knowledge. People get a certain age and you want certain things in your life. Right. Whether it's biologically or whether it's just from living life, getting older. Right. As you get older, you should absolutely be acquiring more things and better things. And you should be upgrading and you should be, but the problem is these type of conversations and this level of structure is not appealing to most people. It's not appealing. Why? Because it's not youthful. It's not, it's not this constant spontaneity. You know what I mean? It's not this recklessness of youth and this endless, voyage of freedom. Right. It's structure. It's discipline. It's going from one goal to the next. It's planning. It's preparation, right? And that's not glamorous. That's adulting, right? And so you have a bunch of people who just never want to grow up. And I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with, hey, live your life. But at the end of the day, you living your life, know that the choices that you make in your life is going to come at a cost. Okay. If you want to live your life as a young man and, you got your degree or you doing your thing and you want to be, smoking weed and, going to the concerts and going to the parties or, dating and doing your thing, that's fine. But realize that's going to come with a cost. You know what I mean? That's going to come with a cost. If you're a young woman and you want to constantly be led by the media and what it says you should be as a black woman, that's constantly changing and, they're constantly changing it up on us. And if you want to be led by that and you're making life decisions based off of that, it's going to come at a cost, And so unfortunately, we reach a point in our lives where we all pay a price for something. We make mistakes. It's okay, but not everybody is, you reach a certain age. Not everybody is willing to come back and tell you something, right? Some people sitting in a room with you and they watching you make the same mistakes they made. Why? Because it feels good to see somebody do what you did. It's challenging when someone made a different choice than you, especially when you gave up on yourself and you're not working to build or better yourself, right? It's challenging to see that and to witness that, So I don't know. I just think, I know it's not a lot of young people on my channel, but I just really wish people heard this. I'm all here for it. The criticism, I'm all here for, the freedom and doing your thing. But so much of this stuff today is misguided. Okay. At the end of the day, this is reality. Like we need some people, come on, touch the ground. Where you at right now? You in Columbus, Ohio, somewhere in an urban community. Like, let's talk about your options. So don't be worried about what they're doing in Cali. Don't be worried about what they're doing in LA. Don't be worried about what this person is doing who went to the school and don't be worried about that. How do you get yourself from A to B? You work in a job you don't like, you're driving a car you don't like this is your reality. These are the things that are in your control. You see what I'm saying? But what's unfortunate for so many of us is that by the time we get a game plan, we didn't already acquire responsibilities we may not be able to hold, right? So we're way down. We don't have, and we don't necessarily have the skills like time management, like structure, like discipline. So what happens is people get older, they get entitlement and they get embittered, right? Because they don't know what to do. They don't know how to change their situation. So many people are unhappy. And I would actually argue, so many African Americans are unhappy because they don't know how to change their situation. You got conversations that are misguided, code switching, things like this, conversations that are misguided, right? You got young kids today who don't even know how to show up in professional settings, showing up in their pajamas. This ain't no conservative talk. This is about the reality, and I feel like for many people, you get to a certain age, and I would even argue for myself at times, where you don't care to sit here and talk to young black kids or, African-American people about the ways in which they can kind of better themselves, at least change their situation, because it starts to be this thing where it's like, well, it's not about getting into white spaces. And again, the conversations are misguided. So what's the solution? What's the alternative? Leave them where they at? What is the alternative? You see what I'm saying? So I don't know. Like I said, I think so much of it today is misguided. You got information coming from the left to the right, and you have no idea how to change your situation. You have no idea how to get yourself in a better position for your family or for whatever you got going on. You see what I'm saying? And that's the dangers of it. Like, I just think for far too long, we've just been without knowledge. You do whatever you want to do. I don't know you. I don't care. But I just noticed at the end of the day, the information is misplaced. The knowledge is not being applied correctly. You know what I mean? And it's too many harmful narratives that's going around than there is helpful. Like, for example, I know a young guy who, went to school, was doing his basketball thing. I don't know if he got caught up with the wrong people or if it just didn't work out. I don't know if he was in school. I think he was in school. I think he dropped out. And, he just, still want to be the popular guy, adopting this type of thing, in the city. And it's like, what are you doing? Me personally, I see beyond the followers. I see beyond the flash. What you got going on? You see what I'm saying? You have a bunch of people who've never built anything. And so this is why you keep talking about, capitalism. Well, what that looks like is that manifests into, this guy getting the business, getting the loan because he has the popularity of the majority of African Americans around him. And then he stands on their shoulders. Then he looks down on them. And then we want to say, well, this is what happens with black men. No, he never had character. He never worked for that. He never built that. He didn't earn y'all respect. Why do y'all praise him? You see what I'm saying? And that's what it is repetitiously. That's the cycle. And this is just what I'm talking about in my community. This is what I'm talking about. You got young men I know, in their 30s, 35, 34, you know what I mean? Played the field their whole lives, playing women, gaming women, whatever their whole thing was with promiscuity. I know we don't like to talk about that within black boys and how that develops into, whatever. Okay. And, he gets older and, now he's in his 40s. He's built nothing. He has built nothing. He's burned every bridge, been all up and through the city. You know what I mean? And what does he have to show for? Now, what is he riding on? Audacity and attitude. You know what I mean? He feels like he looks good, so he should get certain things. And that's what we have continuously. He's at a certain age now where it's like, I'm entitled to this type of woman, or I'm entitled to, I want a house, or I want these things. But it's like, did you build those things? No, you didn't build those things. Endless freedom, boundless freedom. You got young people today who, move away and do certain things in life. And it's like, there's no grounding. There's no structure, just out in other cities and other things, just on vibes. Just to say you there, just to say just to say you bought a house, just out here doing vibes, just on vibes. Now, humbly, this is our first time for everything. Everybody, I get it. This is all our first time. But I just think it just gets to a point where at some point we got to put our feet on the ground. I think African Americans are so heavily influenced by entertainment. And when I say entertainment, I'm talking about just fantasy, reality, fairy tale, and we don't have the information and the knowledge to, really change the world around us, to really get in positions to do, to be the radiologist, you know what I mean? The oncology director, you know what I mean? We just don't have the knowledge. We don't have the information. We don't have the skills. We don't have the preparation to do these things. And like I said, if you want to talk about it and say, okay, this is systemic, that's a conversation for another day. But I think at its core, it starts with the knowledge and it starts with the desire. And for a vast majority of us, we don't have that desire. That's why people get older and it's like you're just entitlement and now you want to just tear down other people and you're, online just wasting time. Just craziness. And you got to be real. That is the vast majority of African Americans. And I'm not going to say vast, but it is definitely a lot of African Americans who are on the other side of that. And now compassionately, there's a reason for that too, right? I think when you're talking about people who have, experienced certain things, dealt with certain things, entertainment kind of becomes the comfort. Okay. And I think I talked about this on a previous episode. So again, I'm not trying to come down on us or anything like that. All I'm saying is that I think that we have to start doing things differently from a foundational level. And I think that definitely starts with getting our kids on the path of structure. You think about career day, like there's so many jobs and so many fields and industries out there that you just never hear about. You know what I mean? Like, you don't even know that you can even be the director of this or the director of that, right? I say oncology, but seriously, you know what I mean? These are things you just never even heard of. And I know it takes time for everybody to kind of figure out what they want to do. So I'm not speaking in terms of generalizations, right? Like I know there's some complexities in there and I acknowledge the nuance, right? But yeah, just overall, you guys, I just think it starts at a foundational level. I really do. And I think what's unfortunate is that for every every time that I feel like there is knowledge that is introduced within the community, here comes here comes the people who are telling you why it's not going to happen. And I think that's actually more common, right? Right now, the conversations is, well, there's no point in going to college or whatever. Well, it's always been that, but it's, you're not going to get a good job anyway, because most of these jobs are taken by AI. You know what I mean? Like, and so it's like you have these type of conversations, and people want to be like, well, it's the government shutdown and it's this, and it's like, I get all of that. I really do. I'm not taking it away from, the realities. But I also know that for many people who are arguing these things, this government shutdown, the federal workers being laid off, AI, removing people's jobs, this is not anything it has nothing to do with you. You know what I mean? This don't have nothing to do with you, And so I think these conversations ultimately never really land well. And I'm going to go ahead and wrap up, but I don't think it ever lands well. I think these conversations are often, just completely, non-productive. And I don't, it is what it is. But I just think at the end of the day, the solution can't be to continuously hate on the people and feel entitled to the resources of other people. And I'm not saying that, again, matter of factly or with the generalization, but I'm just saying sometimes underneath the tone of critiquing influencers and critiquing celebrities is, a gimme mentality, and I do think that for the people that we do praise and the people that we do rise up, as I mentioned, the young basketball person, that young man within our community, I do think they have a level of responsibility to give back to the people who build them up. But the reality is that most people don't. Why? Because they never had the character when you put them in position in the first place, right? As African Americans, we have a lot of power. I know, again, that power, again, and the knowledge of power, of our power and our influence, oftentimes misguided, misdirected. We're misinformed about what that looks like. And but we oftentimes can choose, especially at a local level, who's successful and who's not. But the reality is that if anybody who is not speaking our language, right, and y'all know what that language is, I'm not going to go too far because I don't want to, I'm just not going to do that. I don't need to go there. But, if anybody's not speaking that language, then we reject that. We reject that. We don't want that. Why? Because that doesn't represent all of us. And what is all of us? What is the vast majority? What is that representation? Right. And so it just gets to a point. I think that it just gets to a point. And I guess I'm just coming on to really just kind of talk about, the rise in entitlement and how that's manifesting today, and how a lot of people are becoming incredibly hateful of one another, Black men and Black women, right, of each other, of themselves, and, of the world around us. Right. And I think it's a huge distraction. And I think that grief and that anger is oftentimes misplaced. I think it's one thing. OK, if you want to say, hey, listen, let's look at the systems. Let's look at the structures. Let's look at our generations before us and see how can we, navigate and heal and, move forward. But I think it's another thing to say, this ain't worth nothing. College is a waste of time. And, ain't no point in you going to, like, we got to look at that, because these are the conversations that dominate the youth. And when you have no hope, you have no reason for living. You have no reason for being. So you will kill a life. You'll do whatever you got. You live your life like GTA, because to you, it doesn't matter anyway. Right. And it's a shame. It shouldn't take for people to be incarcerated, for them to be like, wow, I didn't know, I was young. I wish somebody had, come on, when it gets to a point, so it's just unfortunate because, like I said, these are the conversations that don't hit the forefront. So if you're a young 20-something-year-old and you're still living with your parents and you taking it day by day and you're not really building anything, don't get mad when you look up and nothing's been built. All right. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. Hey, you live your life, you getting by, you doing what you got to do. But in the name of trying not to offend, we have set people up for an insurmountable and almost like a spiritual level of disappointment. And I think that manifests as rage and anger. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, sure. You can do what you do. And obviously you guys, like I said, I'm not talking in generalizations, right? There's complexity here. The housing market is what it is. There is no, come on. Y'all know me. We're not doing that, right? You know what I'm saying? Or at least you should get what I'm saying, because that's not the type of content that I make. But my point is, if you don't build anything, you're not going to have anything. Do you see what I'm saying? And so when you get older and you get to a certain age and, there are people around you who have built things, you can't sit here and talk this whole thing of privilege or whatever. Don't sit in that space. Why? Because first of all, many African Americans ain't had no privilege. A lot of people, it's been trial and error. been trial and error. And see, if you look at the people on the ground level, like the people around you, the people who on the ground level, those that are successful, it's been the single moms. You know what I mean? It's been the people who have been in the communities, been infected, impacted by the communities, and had to fight their way out of these communities. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, but so often we're so focused on the exceptionalism. We're focused on the young man who went to Harvard, whose granddad went to Harvard, whose family, like, you see what I'm saying? Like, we're focused on the exceptionalism, because the people around us, it's not as appealing, right? There's nothing to aspire to. And I think that's one of the more unfortunate things about being people who are oppressed is like, you're always looking down, right? So you're constantly trying to find ways to look up, right? You're constantly looking up, and trying to find someone to aspire to, right? Instead of just being like, hey, this is what's around me. How can I dream with my eyes wide open? You need courage to dream with your eyes wide open, but when you're in this state of like, you're just so low and you're constantly looking down, you're always going to be trying to find somebody to look up to, right? And that's how propaganda works. That's how they're able to, influence us into buying things, into believing certain ideologies about ourselves, into adopting certain stereotypes about ourselves, right? Because if you don't know who you are, the world's going to give you that. And that's not just a Black thing. That's not an African American thing. That's just an American thing. That's a marketing thing. You think you ugly as a woman? Oh, well, we got something for you. Come on up here in Sephora and give us your whole paycheck, because everything in here $50, $60, $70. You know what I mean? Like, you don't think you enough? Come up in here. Come on down here to Dominica, and we can get you these BBL shots. You know what I mean? Like, come on. You think as a woman or as a man, you think you're not good enough? Come on over here in this community, and let me tell you how to beat these bees up. Let me tell you how to slap these black bees around. You know what I mean? Come on now. If you don't know who you are, people gonna tell you who you are. And the worst thing about that is it's so predatory. It's so sinister. It'll have you out here doing things that'll set your whole life back. You see what I'm saying? Because you reap what you sow. So it's like if you out here doing people wrong, you know what I mean, in the name of community or in the name of trying to, validate yourself through some toxic community or some toxic paradigm, you're going to pay a price for that. Why? Because that's just how life works. You can't do good. Listen, you cannot put bad out in the world and expect good to come back for you. The only people who are able to put bad out in the world and it looks like something good is coming back to them are people who have infinite amount of resources, right? That's why you hear about the rich men who are corrupt. Why? Because you can buy yourself out of a lot of things, but eventually fate is going to have its way with you. You see what I'm saying? And you don't know the problems that they're dealing, right? So it's just one of, and even still, it's only so long of that anyway. It's only so long before the money runs out or before you're hit with something to where you no longer have the resources. You know what I mean? And now you got to pay the price. And that's where most of these old guys and people who be with, all this money, they commit suicide because they ain't trying to pay that price, so you don't get something for nothing. And that's my message to young people. And I think that's what I'm going to name this podcast. Like, you don't get something for nothing. Okay. You don't get to buy the house and you put no work in. That's not how it works. And like I said, I tell you guys all the time, for so many influencers, the ones that I've seen that are successful, you got people who started on YouTube 10 years ago, where ain't nobody wasn't even on YouTube. So now it's a matter of timing, right? That's how the American society works. It's about timing and opportunity. Most people who are successful, you don't see the work prior, but it's all about timing. And we call it luck because we can't predict the future. So we don't know, when they started those YouTube channels 10 years ago, they didn't know that it was probably going to be this. Or maybe they did, but my point is, even in that, you see how I have no idea about that influencer culture and how people started 10 years ago. Why? Because that's not my lane, right? But they probably knew that it was going to be something. They probably knew it was money into this. And if they kept, you know what I mean? So my point is, you got to stay in your lane. You have to build. It's not pretty. It's not glamorous. It's not overnight. But eventually you are going to build something that's going to be beautiful and that's going to be prosperous and that's going to allow you to enjoy the latter days of your life. You know, you're going to build something that's going to reap some type of harvest that's going to be fulfilling, whether that's your relationships or whatever. You know, it's nothing like being in a relationship with somebody and you guys are growing old together, right? Every year you celebrate a birthday, you guys grow closer. You understand more about your partner. You guys, you know, the love making, you know what I mean? Like the companionship, it develops and it is so beautiful. You know what I mean? But for so many people today, you're never going to get there. Why? Because you're not getting on the road. You're not getting on the road. You see what I'm saying? So you have people today, everything is out of whack, it's out of alignment, and everybody is so focused on aesthetics, and they wonder why they're so incredibly bitter. They wonder why nothing's really working out and why they're not internally satisfied. You know what I mean? Internally, because people are performing adulthood instead of actually living it. When you grow up, it's no longer glamorous, okay? Your body's change, responsibility shifts, priority shifts. Ain't nothing cute about it. You're getting older. It's not cutesy anymore. That doesn't mean that you don't live a brand new life. You grow and it changes. You know what I mean? You grow just like a child. Okay, the child isn't a baby anymore, you know, but now the child's, you know, and the child continues to grow and it looks different. The needs are different. You see what I'm saying? It's the same thing with adulting. That doesn't mean that when you get older and require some responsibility and get a plan and get stable and start handling your business, it doesn't mean that the fun is out the window. The fun changes. It looks different now. You see what I'm saying? Maybe it's not necessarily constantly going out and meeting a bunch of women and sowing your wild oats and reaping bad karma. You know, maybe now it looks like, you know, spending time with your kids. Maybe it looks like family movie nights. You know what I mean? Do people still go to the movies? I don't know. But it looks different now. That's all that is. But it's fulfilling. You know, it's fulfilling. So one thing I realize as African-American people, and I'm going to conclude here, and I think this is probably something I would say for a lot of people really, is people don't have the wisdom to live a good life. You know, I think it actually takes wisdom to know how to live a good life. And I'm being real. Like, I think you got to know how to live. You know, we hear a lot about certain things, okay, how to eat right and et cetera, which I would even argue that the spirit of gluttony is going around, even in terms of, you know, our cuisine and how we eat, right? Like, I think people are finding some type of void in food, in culinary, you know. It's not to say people can't cook, but I mean, everything today is just, you know, no shade. I don't have any comments in regards to that. Let me not veer. But people are trying to fill voids that, you know, can't be filled without the price of hard work, without sacrifice. There's really something in hardship and something in acquiring responsibilities, right? Becoming a parent, becoming a wife, becoming a husband, that it changes you. It builds you. It makes something of you. And it's like pressure, and it's hard. It's hard. It's not fun, right? It's something in, you know, going to work every day, working your entry level job or whatever the case may be, and the monotony of that. But there's something in sticking with something and getting good at it and mastery. You know what I mean? There's really I'm someone who I take pleasure in mastery, right? Like when I first started my podcast, I was stuttering. I was all over the place. I was cursing. I have no idea how I wanted to show up, you know, and now I'm in a space where it's like, I can speak without stuttering. I can articulate myself. You know what I mean? It's completely different. My vocabulary has, you know, developed. I mean, I'm not the smartest in the room, but, you know, this is better than it was in 2018. I think I got a few words in my handbook there, you know, in my back pocket. So there's something in that. And I just think that's the thing that we don't have. And we get angry and we get jealous of people who do have mastery, whether it is, you know, sports or entertainment, right? It's mastery. And that's what you really want. And so in order for you to get good at something, you got to figure out what you're good at. You got to stick with it. And guess what? It's going to evolve over time. You know, it's going to evolve over time. It's not going to stay the same. You know, you may start out, you know, doing one thing, and then it's going to evolve over time. And at some point, you're going to accumulate enough experiences, right? You're going to be able to start a business. And, you know, it might be a little side hustle to pay some bills here and there, or it might be something that can really, you know, transform your life and put you in a better position. We'll have a conversation on another day about entrepreneurship and what I think that looks like for many African Americans. But I just wanted to conclude with this. And I just wanted to let you guys know, There's really something beautiful in doing the hard things. Because let me tell you something. When you don't do the hard things, it doesn't have to be children. It doesn't have to be marriage. It doesn't have to be, a career. But I'm going to be honest with you. As complex as we want to make life, and I know there's nuances and all of that. As complex as life can be, the American way in our culture, fundamentally, is pretty simple, right? And I don't even think it's an American thing. I think it's a Homo sapien thing, right? The human organism, there's not really much out there for us. So when you take away our ability to procreate as organisms and say, hey, listen, we're not going to do that, right? Like, human beings need certain things in order to thrive, in order to live, right? And I'm talking about it from a scientific standpoint. You know what I mean? Just like the freaking blue jay. You know what I mean? Like, it needs air, it needs to fly, so I don't think we realize that. And I think it's really cool from an evolutionary standpoint to kind of see what scientists are saying. I know they've kind of been talking about social media and its impact on the blue lighting and things like that on our brains and our attention spans. But I just think when you start stripping an organism away from its habitat, of its purpose, right, for what it's here for, you are going to see some repercussions of that. And I don't think those repercussions are going to be pretty. There's nothing fun, there's nothing satisfying, and most importantly, there is nothing fulfilling about a life that never changes. It never changes. There is nothing satisfying about that. Why? Because guess what? You're going to go on and you're going to make more money. You're going to go on and you're going to have but if there's nothing that comes into your life that changes it, that requires you to grow, it's a waste of a life. Okay, that's too extreme. Let me not get too motivational. But I am going to tell you, it's not fulfilling. You're going to feel lost. You're going to feel lonely. You're going to feel incomplete. You're going to be alive. You're going to be functioning. But my words have failed me. That's not what I meant to say. I just think a life that never changes is a person that never changes, is a person that never gets to explore new things and grow. And, American society and most societies for humans, right? And wherever humans are occupying the space, there is a level of traditionalism that, typically there's, family, there's, partnership, and there's a sense of belonging. When all those things are kind of stripped away from the human species, I don't really know what is left of the organism and what that organism is going to do and how that organism is going to transform. Typically what we see and what I've observed is that the organism starts to regress, right? We start to, start dating teenagers, right? And so you have this culture of society today, or rather American society and its foundation, right? Which has always kind of been, on the cusp of pedophilia, right? And so you have this normalization of dating young girls, and it's been historic. And, so I think that that's kind of what you're going to start to see within human beings. I think you're going to see a lot of people who regress, and they kind of become more like adolescent, and they don't have compassion. They don't have empathy. They don't have the ability to do hard things, right? You have this, this chemical dependence, whether it's dopamine, whether it's, I was going to say cigarettes, whether it's, whatever the dependence is, right? The mind, right? The human mind is going to find some kind of way to start to compensate for the lack of mastery, right? For the lack of idleness, right? For the lack of stimulation, right? Because the human organism needs that. That's why we look at what takes place in solitary confinement, and we see what happens to, human beings and other organisms, right? Species rather, that are put into solitary confinement. So this is your life, right? I don't care how you live it, but what I am here to say is that, this level of entitlement that people have, is unfortunate, because it's like a child saying, gimme. And the only way you'll ever really have fulfillment within yourself is if you put yourself in hard situations, you stick with it, you do, you grow from everything that you learn from, right? But and obviously you reach a point through hardship and difficulty where you will meet some level of stability, right? So it comes a point in time. But I do think that the lack of development that is within the lives of many of us, right, as young adults, it doesn't yield wisdom in our older years, right? And so what you see is people start to regress, and there's this sense of adolescence, right, that is perpetuated. So people go back to what they know, what's familiar, what's comfortable, but most importantly, what is prevalent within society, right? Which is the praising of and the pedestalization of young people, so people regress and people go back to what they know. So I'm going to go. I think this conversation was very interesting. I hope you guys got something from this. I think the biggest thing is you have to learn from what it is that you go through. And I don't know. I think you have to have a thirst for knowledge and a desire for knowledge. I think, many people's desires is not to know more, right? People aren't even curious. Why? I don't know. I think that for a lot of people, I think children, young Black children, because of the difficulty sometimes that a lot of these kids grow up in, and even from my own experience, parents aren't really willing to sit with the child's curiosity and nurture the curiosity, because it's like, oh, mommy, why, the food stamp card was declined, or, So I think there's a lot of protection in there, and it's a different environment there. But I also think that it gets to a point where certain skills aren't nurtured, aren't cultivated. I don't know. I think people stop asking questions. People stop asking questions, and it kind of becomes a unspoken thing of, this is just the way that it is. And so if this is just the way that it is, why be curious about it and try to make any changes? Why try to, why do anything different about it? But I think most importantly, the biggest impact that we have and have had, and I'm going to end here, I'm serious, is that the voices of celebrities and entertainers has always been louder than the voices of the people who have wisdom. It's always been louder than the adults who actually know what's going on. It can actually help people and better their situations and better their lives, right? Like, the voices of entertainers have always been louder than those who actually maybe possess the wisdom to liberate the minds of many people, And then for the other aspect is that you have, anytime you have people who are inferior and you put them in positions of power, right? And this is not just a Black thing. This is just, you can see this on your job, right? That one supervisor who's, but whenever you give someone who's inferior a position of power, they're always going to abuse it, right? And so you have that as well. So this was a great conversation. A little bit all over the place. I don't think so, but you let me know in the comments. I hope you guys got something from this. Peace.